the captains of our own ship, the masters of our own destiny, which was something that I had not really realized earlier before I became a coach.
Hi, friends. This is Read and Write with Natasha podcast. My name is Natasha Tynes, and I'm an author and a journalist. In this channel, I talk about the writing life, review books, and interview authors. Hope you enjoy the journey. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. Today, I'm very happy to have with me author Joelle Jackson. She is the author of the book Unlock Your Conscious Leadership. Liberate your four key parts: mind, heart, body, and talent. Joelle Jackson is a certified professional coach who helps individuals, groups, and communities liberate their whole self from the status quo and consciously choose to lead themselves and others to their goals and dreams. Jackson was selected as one of the top 20 coaches in Sacramento in 2021. Hi, Joelle. I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast, and thank you for agreeing to chat with me.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be connecting with an old friend that I haven't seen in years.
Yeah, me too. It's been like what, 10 years? Yeah, you moved to a different coast, and we miss you guys. But we're glad we get to chat, and I'm so excited and happy about your book. I finished it and I read it, and I feel like, I like benefited from it, and I feel, I learned a lot from it. So, I'm not gonna hog the conversation. The audience here are to hear from you. So the first thing is, tell us, what is this book about?
So when I started as a coach, I discovered tools and techniques and ways around going about life that help us feel more empowered, help us feel more that we are in control of our lives. We are the captains of our own ship, the masters of our own destiny, which was something that I had not really realized earlier before I became a coach. And I felt a need and a desire to share that with the world, this message of self-empowerment. So I started working on the book maybe 6 years ago when we moved to California. Also as a way to kind of leverage the work that I'm doing, help with my brand as a coach and with my focus on liberating oneself from the status quo. And then, as being a working mom and owning my business like you, there are a lot of distractions. So it's really hard to find the time to sit down and write. And, I've heard other mom authors that say, oh, get up and make the time. I was writing at 4 a.m. I'm like, no, that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to be able to get up at 4 a.m. and write. So then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, so a lot of people were forced to go within, within their homes and be with their families, and they were forced to look within. So not where they in lockdown, but they were also forced to look within, look at their lives and begin to ask themselves questions around how much am I really living my life in alignment with what is most important to me?
Mm-hmm.
What are my top whys? If you know that Simon Sinek talk on Start
Yeah,
With
yeah.
book. So a lot of people begun to realize that they're really not living their life in alignment with their values. They're not living their lives in integrity, because that is essentially what that means. And, as we then saw, this led to the great resignation, because people were like, forget it. We're not going back to status quo ante. We are going to create a different life. But many of them were lost. They didn't even know where to start. They're like, okay, I'll maybe get another job or start my own business. But when we want to change our lives, we would want to dig deep and liberate four key parts of ourselves. But I just want to take a step back. Yes, the book is titled Unlock Your Conscious Leadership. And conscious leadership here, and how it ties into everything I'm saying, is this act of leading ourselves, leading our thoughts, emotions, and actions consciously. It's choosing thoughts and emotions and actions that empower us, that make us feel that we are creating our reality, we are shaping the life that we want. And a lot of people, they discover this wisdom and they begin to do it. And at first they're like, yeah, they hear all these inspirational speakers telling them, change the way you think positively. And I've been there. But then you're changing the way you think, you're thinking positively, but not too much is changing in your life. So I discovered the reason why not too much is changing in your life, even though you're choosing to lead yourself consciously or to become a conscious leader, is because there are those four key parts of yourself that are still stuck in the status quo, that need liberating, that need to be, you need to hone in on them and do the work around them, maybe one, two, or more, or all of them, in order for you to be truly a conscious leader. Because if you want to lead yourself consciously, but then your heart is closed, or you're too much in the head, or you're ignoring your physical well-being, or you're stuck in a career, or you're not unleashing your skills and passion, nothing's really going to change at your core. You have to work on all these parts of your whole self in order to change your life. Again, there's a lot of concepts that interchange here and overlap, but it's essentially, you cannot become who you want to be, a conscious leader, unless you work on liberating your whole self.
Thank you. That's very insightful. So you started the book telling about your story working for someone who was a traditional leader, was not a conscious leader, and how it affected you personally, and how like you were naive when you started the journey. So in this case, what if you work for someone who's not a conscious leader? You are facing this obstacle, and how can you liberate yourself if you are bound by these circumstances of working someone who does not think like you, who's still with the mindset of the traditional leader, especially if you're still not ready to take the jump and join the great resignation movement, so you're still working for someone?
So that is a great question. I can't say it will be easy to want to be a conscious leader and work for an unconscious leader, or be doing your work to become a conscious leader and be stuck in a situation where you are faced with unconscious people. But the beauty of being a conscious leader is that you truly become the change you want to see in the world. And it's all rooted in your ability to begin to look at the world and look at yourself differently. When you begin to look at yourself and the world differently and consciously, you begin to exude a different energy.
Mhm.
And that energy not only is inspiring you and motivating you to get up every morning and take on the day because you know you're living in alignment with your values, but is also going to inspire those around you. The hope is that you will inspire that person who's around you to become more conscious, but it's not guaranteed, because I tried it, in this journey of me becoming a coach, starting my own business. And, it's like a roller coaster. You have moments where like, oh my gosh, my business is not going like I want it to go, but I have all these expenses. I need to get a job. And then you go get a job and you find yourself stuck back where you were before you became a coach, or for me. And you're like, what am I doing? This is not the environment that I want to work in. So then I quit. And that happened to me twice, actually.
Mhm.
So it's, but I truly believe in this principle that, Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Hence
Mhm.
this behind me. Because conscious leadership, is something I just want to just highlight this idea that I learned about conscious leadership through IPAC coaching, which is the coaching school that I attended. And IPAC has conducted a ton of surveys and research around it to show the evidence, science-based research, to show the evidence that conscious leadership works in terms of this idea that when we change our energy, which is basically the way we think, feel, and act, or consciousness or attitude, when we change our energy, we change the world around us. So when we go work for someone who's unconscious, there's a chance we could change it depending on how many of us around us is actually like us. But some people will not change. And then the onus is on us on whether or not we want to accept the situation, or change the way, change it if we have the ability to change it, or walk away from it. But that is the conscious choice to make those choices, know that we have those options, and then pick one of them, and not feel like we are at the effect of the situation. Because once we begin to feel that we are a victim, or that we move into also this anger, frustration, irritation, then we are not being conscious. Anytime we're feeling basically that we are in survivor mode, fight, flight, freeze, or appease, we're not being conscious, and then that is not doing us any good, and it's not doing anyone around us any good.
Um, I was chatting earlier with my dad this morning, and I was telling him that I'm gonna have Joelle on the podcast, and we're talking about all the concepts in the book. And he mentioned something that made me think, like my dad is like a traditional Arab dad, so he can be a bit skeptical of some of the ideas. And he's like, what would be her reaction to what's happening now in Ukraine? How can you have a choice on that? And how can you make a conscious decision when there is, like all of these tools might not apply in a situation like a war or death or bigger tragedies? So if you have, and since both you and me come from a Middle Eastern background, so like skepticism is rampant. It's improving these days, and I wrote an article about it. But still, skepticism about issues of personal development is still there. So, how would you answer someone who would bring bigger issues like or major life tragedies like war and death, and how we can apply these tools?
That's an excellent question, because of course people will tell you, what are you talking about? How is it that you're saying, that we create our reality through the way we think and feel. However, how in the world were we creating this tragedy? And as a person who grew up in Lebanon, and I spent all my childhood and teenage years in Lebanon, so through the worst parts of the Lebanese civil war, I can tell you, of course, we didn't create that through our own, way of thinking and feeling. At the same time, things happen collectively. It's the collective that is actually creating. So it's not just the individual. Now, we are put in a place where we have a choice. Do we want to feel like we are at the effect of the situation? And it's, of course, it's I wouldn't say human. It wouldn't be human not to say that, yes, I'm going to feel like I'm a victim, or, I'm suffering. But at the same time, one of the principles that I was introduced to through IPAC is this idea that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. So I believe that it's, we will be finding ourselves in any aspect of life at times struggling or mistreated, or I'm not going to say suffering, because suffering is a choice, but we're going to feel that we're mistreated, or we're going to feel that we are living in a tragedy or a war. But there's what will make us feel empowered is this idea of whether or not we choose to suffer, or we're going to change our mindset and our attitude towards what we're experiencing. So you think about, for example, Nelson Mandela. He was in jail for how many years? Like 20 years?
20 years, yeah, something like this, yeah.
But he managed to overcome that difficulty and challenge in his life with his attitude. He studied and was able to work on his self-development. And many other people who suffer in different ways, whether it's a physical disability or any sort of tragedy, because again, being conscious is being able to focus on this idea that challenges and difficulties in life are always going to happen, but they always present us with opportunities. So are we going to be focused on the problem? Can you see it?
Yeah, I see it.
Or the solution? We really choose which side we want to look at.
Yeah, and this reminds me of one of my favorite books by Viktor Frankl. I'm sure you're very familiar with his work. I mean, his book really changed my outlook, especially when I was going through a very hard time. So yeah, and I have a story for you. I'm saving it as a surprise, but I'm not sure if you remember it, but like more than 10 years ago, while you were in the process of being certified, you gave me a coaching session, and
I
10
did.
you
I
did.
don't remember. Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
So until now, I think about that coaching session. And you told me something during that coaching session that you were telling me, like, I was like working. I don't remember what I was doing back then, but just a regular job. And we were talking about our passion, and then you started asking me, what do you like? And I told you some stuff, and I told you like writing, and then it's like, Natasha, I can hear it from your voice. The tone of your voice changed when you mentioned writing to me, and this sentence like resonated for me. Like every time I think, what do I want to do with my life, I remember this sentence. And here we go, 10 years later, I'm a full-time writer, pursuing what I love. And it's you heard it, you heard it in my voice. And this was just to tell you that how you influence people. One of them is me, and I'm pursuing that, and I will always remember this. And I'm sure you forgot it, but it resonates with me.
That makes me so happy. But that's exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about unleashing our talent.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you unleashed your talent. You decided to believe in that, in the fact that you have a talent when it comes to writing, and you pursued it. And I mean, how do you feel now that you're able to live that?
I'm extremely happy. And for me, is there's I'm sure you're familiar with the term the Sunday blues, which is people like on Sunday evening they get really like
That
stressed
energy
and
drink.
energy down because the next day is Monday, they're gonna go back to the office. And I used to suffer massively from the Sunday blues. I won't be able to sleep, insomnia, like heart palpitation. Now I cannot wait for Monday morning. I mean, like my Sunday night is awesome. Like I'm reading and excited, and I can't wait to wake up in the morning, drink my coffee, and work on the stuff that I like. And for me, that indication of battling the Sunday blues syndrome is really indication of I'm pursuing what I like, of unleashing the talent, as you mentioned in your book. So just
Can I comment on that? You know
of
what's
course.
happening, actually. I talk about it in the book, but that is exactly what you're going through. It's this idea you've discovered your why.
Hmm.
And I tell my clients, your why is like the trunk of a tree, okay?
Okay.
It keeps you grounded and anchored and rooted. And all your choices, decisions, and actions, they grow out of the tree like the branches of the tree.
Hmm.
So the more you are aligned with your why, with your values, and making all your choices and decisions and actions rooted in your values, life is going to feel really good. And it's not going to feel like you're coming from a place of I have to, I should, I must. There's no more shoulds.
Hmm.
Only want to.
I want
So
to.
you wake up Monday morning, you're like, I love this. This is
Yeah.
what I want to do. This doesn't feel like work because I'm living my values. I'm unleashing my talent. I'm putting my skills and passion to work. So why wouldn't you want to get up on Monday morning? It'll feel great. And that's for me. For me, my work is not work. My work is fun. Every time I get on a call with a client, no matter how challenging the situation may be, but the mere fact that I feel that I'm helping them, I'm helping to guide them to that inner genius within them that has all the answers to their questions and all the solutions to their problems, the more gratified I feel, because I truly feel, yes, I'm making a change, and I'm helping them be the change they want to see in the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've witnessed it, so I'm a huge believer. I want to go back to the issue of the Great Resignation. This morning I get an email. I always get like email from PR agencies or publishers who want me to talk about their book, or if they want me. So one of them is telling me, we saw that you wrote about the Great Resignation. Are you interested in interviewing our CEO who has a strategy to beat the Great Resignation? So I feel there are two kind of ways of thinking now. There are those who like all gun ho about the Great Resignation, the idea of 9 to 5 is pretty antiquated. Something came like as like because of the industrial revolution and creation of factories, and after World War II, we all revolved, but the 9 to 5 concept stayed the same, and we should basically eradicate it. And we can all be like us, what do you call us, solo entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is one way of thinking. The other school of thought is, no, we can reform the workplace, and so we can change the great resignation to a great retention. So where do you stand in this? Do you think that, it's like the concept of working for leaders um, is not applicable anymore, because many of them are not conscious leaders, and we all of us went through the pandemic and reassessed what we want? Or you think that, no, there is hope in salvaging the 9 to 5 structure?
Great question, because I talk about it in my last chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a believer in the latter, that we need to turn this into a great retention. We are being presented with an opportunity to change the paradigm. And I mean, we do. It's unfortunate that we have to have something as tragic as a pandemic to force us to change the way we go about our work and our work policies. But, before the pandemic, I felt like I was just like one of very few people who were coaching around this concept of conscious leadership. And for many, it seemed very foreign. I mean, you had people like Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he's still at LinkedIn, but, very few people talked about being conscious leaders. They talked about, always trying to look at another person with compassion and empathy, trying to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, not to judge, to discern. And, we lack that. We lack the heart in the way we do our work. It's very much of a head-based approach. And whenever you are only focused on one of your parts, the head and not the heart, there's a state of imbalance. And I think that is the reason why so many people were not happy prior to the pandemic. And then the pandemic gave them that impetus to want to ask for change. We would want to look again at the paradigm of how we work in this country. And the mere fact that we were forced to change it has given the leverage needed to make the argument that, yes, it works to get, have a flexible schedule. It works to work from home. People will not slack off. In fact, the studies and the data has shown that people tend to be more productive when you are giving them that flex schedule and you're giving them, the ability to work from home. And especially for working parents, as I can't imagine the life you had. I remember the commuting into DC on the metro and then coming back home, and now you have 3 kids, right? Because
I have 3
had
kids.
one more after I left.
Yeah.
So how can, this is, limiting our ability to tap into the talent, particularly of working moms. And that is going to affect our economy, our ability as a country to unleash our potential even more. So at the end of the day, we would want to think win-win. The way we were thinking before is unconscious. It's about I win, you lose. They think that by just hiring you and paying you money, that you're happy. But when you're just struggling and you're not able to be your best self, because once you are your best self, you can be more productive and unleash your potential. If you're not able to be that, then you're actually not winning, you're losing, and they're losing with you. So I guess they have to, or they'd want to. I try to catch myself using the words have and should, but employers nowadays, they want to, but they're also being forced to look at things differently. And yes, some of them are going to be open to it because they have a growth mindset, and others are going to dig in their heels and say, nope, I'm not going to do it. But I believe those are the ones that are going to be left behind, because there is the tipping point. And I feel that more people would want to change the way they look at things and do things, because more and more people want things differently. And then you look at the Generation Z, they are so different even than the millennials. They want that. And that is the future. We can't avoid it.
Well, then I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here, since you brought Generation Z and the Generation differences. So devil's advocate is about work ethics. So people would say like difference between the work ethics of Generation X versus millennials. I'm gonna focus on that. So you have the Generation X where like I'm gonna work until I die and I'm gonna retire and you're gonna give me the money whatever you say. And then the you have the millennial who like I can't do that. I need a mental health break. This is a toxic environment, and all these kind cultural changes to the workplace or requirements that Generation X did not ask for or did not care for, and they had this kind of work ethic, like a 9 to 5. I do the job, I get paid, I retire, and that's it. So I heard criticism about from Generation X that millennials do not have the work ethic that is needed now for the workforce, and they use terms like I need a mental health break so that they not work as hard as Generation X. So I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
That's
I'm not.
a great point.
Yeah.
What I want to just take you back to is this point I make in the book. We all look at life from our own lens that's been
Right.
shaped and conditioned by the way we've been brought up, by our social constructs, by our culture, by our ethnicity, even by our language. They say it affects the way we look at life and ourselves. Generation Xers, they grew up in a certain kind of world, and that's the way they looked at life, right?
Yeah.
And then here comes the millennials are actually now, some of them are in their 40s.
40s.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
not the young ones anymore. Like when I was working, the millennials were
Or like
young ones.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're old now, and they were brought up in a somewhat of a different world, so they have a different lens. We can be hung up on judgment and labeling them as, oh, what a lazy crowd they are, and they don't want to work, and look at us, we're hardworking. But what we would want to ask ourselves is, what do we really want? And I can guarantee you that no one amongst them, I mean, maybe there would be people and in the Generation X group that would be like, not many would say, I want to keep doing things the way I've been doing it, because I can guarantee you not everybody is happy.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we would want to be honest with ourselves and say, are we more hung up on this idea of judging the millennials, or would we want to look more at our lives and ask ourselves, how happy, how fulfilled, how healthy am I? Because at the end of the day, I can't see how a Generation Xer would say I'm happy with the way things are going, that I'm burnt out, basically,
Yeah.
that I'm not being able to be present with my kids when I'm at home because my head is always at work, that I don't have time to go to the gym or take a walk with my wife, or whatever, this idea of work-life balance or work-life integration. So whenever we experience a shift or a change, we're going to see things swing from one end of the spectrum to the other end, just like a pendulum, right? It swings from one end to the other end until it settles somewhere right there in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So we are in this process of a major shift. And of course, we're going to see the extremes, and the extremes are kind of overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, how is it that we were doing this way and they want, look at them, all they want is a mental health day. But no, I think the outcome of this shift, if we can allow ourselves to sit and not judge and allow things to happen and maybe contribute to them positively by looking for those conscious leadership or advocating for conscious leadership approaches, such as let's create a win-win workplace, let's create a workplace where people are not being led by this fear-based ideas of command and control, approaches of command and control, manipulation and intimidation, but rather inspiration and motivation that is rooted in aligning in values of empowering the individual, of power with instead of power over, which is something I learned from another teacher that I had. Her name is Judith Glaser. She wrote the book Conversational Intelligence. But again, it's power with instead of power over. If we can be advocates for all of these principles that are part of conscious leadership, we will eventually help the collective move more into that middle, where I believe is a win-win. That's where we all want to be.
Well said. So
No
now
one answers all the time. I'm sorry. I get really passionate about these
no,
things.
no, of course, of course. I mean, this is this is great. That's what this podcast is all about. Is just to share ideas and bounce them back and forth. So I'm just gonna shift to your writing process, because part of this podcast is as well to talk about the writing process and the publishing process, just to help writers and aspiring authors. So for me, like, there's been a huge amount of research in this book done. And I'm curious to hear about how long it took you to finish this book, and what was your research mechanism, and how did you capture these ideas? Like, did you keep a notes system all through the years, and then you went back to it, or you just collected these notes as you were writing? So I'm just curious about your writing process and how long it took you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out there's a lot of research because, having gone to grad school and then I read a lot of psychology books, my inner critic was like, I better back this up with the research because then people will not take me seriously, right?
Yeah.
What I did is that every time I heard something or read something or I thought of something, I was using my smartphone to just put a note in. And I
Okay.
was just like adding notes. And then I added notes also on my in a draft message on my email. That was the initial stage.
Okay.
But then as the idea of how the book, I want to structure the book began to crystallize for me, then I created Word documents. And it wasn't too clear at the beginning, like how many chapters, what do I want to talk about. First, I had maybe one main master document, but as the book began to take the shape that it ended up with, then I split them up into each chapter. And under each chapter, I began to plug in like links to articles, ideas that I wanted to discuss. But I wouldn't say it was like a perfect science, because at the end of the day, I just found myself, I'm going to write the introduction, and I just went for it.
Mhm.
But there were many times too that I would go back and change things around, and I would add and I would shift things around. And the last 5 chapters that in which I talk about the stages of liberation, they came later, so I didn't really think of them initially, so I just added them. In a way, it had like a method to the madness, and in another way it was, it didn't. I
Okay.
just very organic.
Okay. And how many years, like, what was the period of writing the whole thing and finishing it, and to publishing it?
So I started jotting things down, I would say in 2015, late
Uh-huh.
2015, early 2016, when we moved to California. But then I didn't really focus a ton on it until the pandemic. So
Yeah.
that was 2020. Yeah.
And you self-published this book,
Yeah.
and a number of authors now are like skipping the gatekeepers. They're not even bothering with publishers, and they go to the route of self-publishing it. So why did you self-publish? Is it because you don't want to deal with an agent and a publisher, or it was hard to find one, or you just went directly to the route of self? And how was the whole experience self-publishing a book?
So what happened is I ended up, I think it was last year around this time of year, I ended up taking a workshop with Hay House Publications. They publish a lot of these self-help books, and they published all the books by Louise Hay because she's the person who founded that publishing house. And Louise Hay inspired me, and also Wayne Dyer. So I'm like, why don't I go and see what they have to offer? Because they also offer the workshops. I was like, let me see what they have to say. And so when I attended the workshop, I discovered that, yeah, it sounds cool to have, a publisher publish your book. But even if they accepted my proposal, it might take 2 years for my
Mhm.
book to get published. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not into this to make money.
Yeah.
I'm into this to spread a message, and I can do this. So I'll just do it. And I wasn't sure how, but I'm like, yeah, people self-publish. I mean, they talked about it a little bit in the workshop because they have Balboa Press, and they also offer people to self-publish through Balboa Press. Um, but then I did my research and I met my wonderful editor who is actually Palestinian American too. I love empowering women too. So
Yeah.
and she helped me. Like she was like, why don't you try Amazon KDP? I'm like,
Mm.
okay. And at first it was a bit overwhelming because you're like, oh gosh, I have to do all this by myself. But it wasn't as bad. I think the hardest part in all of it was getting the documents formatted in a way that would work with uploading them to
Yeah.
tape.
Yeah.
And everything else was not that bad.
And did you format it yourself, or did you hire someone to do the formatting for?
The for the paperback copy, I did it myself, and also for the Kindle. With the Kindle, I was almost done with it and I was about to hire someone, and I'm like, forget it, I'll just finish it. I kind of have this this tendency to just want to like keep persevering until I get it done, because I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like the best use of your time. So if anybody is interested in writing their book, I would recommend they look into someone else to do these things for them, because it will save them the time. But for me, I kind of got a little bit compulsive about finishing it
Okay.
on my own timeline.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I dabbled a bit with KDP, and the formatting is not easy. I'm gonna self-publish my second book, so these are also questions for me. But
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, so what about the the writing process in terms of, did you write every day? You're a working mom, kids, family, house, social obligation. What was your writing routine?
So for me, I felt like my energy was the best, like is optimal for writing after I'm done with my calls and I'm done with taking care of my kids.
Okay.
So by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the kids are like doing homework or winding down, because they were actually at home at that time. So
Yeah.
they would be online school all day. 4 o'clock, they may be watching a show or doing an activity, and they're a little bit older now, so they can be independent. I would just sit down and work in my office, and I would maybe tell myself I'm going to write for an hour and a half every day, and that was it. And that's how I went about it. There were times when I just felt like, oh, so unmotivated, and it's
Mm.
normal. But the more you can think about the end goal, and one of my end goals was I wanted to get it done by Christmas of 2021 so that people can have it in their stockings
Okay.
and I can gift it to people. So even though it was like really a race against time, I managed to get it done. It wasn't perfect at that point. Not that perfection ever exists. Perfection is an illusion. But I had to go back and do a few tweaks to it after the fact. But yeah, having a goal and trying to work towards that goal and taking it baby steps, I think was really helpful for me.
Hmm.
And being realistic on what you can do and not trying to measure yourself against what other people do, like the woman who said she wakes up at 4 a.m.
Yeah. But probably she goes to bed like at 8, you
Yeah,
know.
probably.
So can you go to bed at 8? Like,
No.
is, yeah. I mean, it's people have different circumstances as well.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of the reception, what was the reception to the book? And what was the feedback? Did you get any negative feedback? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
So far, the feedback has been very encouraging and very positive. And even if it wasn't positive, I try to coach myself because I want to be truly the lead by example. I try to coach myself that this is a learning opportunity. I've never written a book before, and not that everybody's going to resonate with it. There are people who may not like it, and that's okay. That's okay because they have a different lens. I'm not here trying to convince people to think about the world the way I do, but I'm going to be true to my authentic self and I'm going to speak my truth. And if they like it, great. If they don't, okay, you know.
So I was talking with someone about books and publishing, and she said that she would never publish a book because she won't be able to handle the feedback, and that if she get a 1-star review on Goodreads, she would like collapse, and she would. So how would you coach authors who get 1 star or 0 stars or really like uh, uh, negative feedback, especially in main publications where, and I've seen it everywhere. So how would you coach them? What would you tell them?
So that kind of, I like a similar like a situation comes up when you're coaching people around performance reviews, and they have
Oh,
like a slew of positive feedback, or in 360 evaluations they get all this positive feedback, and then one or two comments in the feedback is kind of like constructive, or if you want to label it as negative or whatever, and everyone gets hung up on it,
yeah,
right? We all do, me
yeah.
included, right? That because we have a tendency as human beings, a psychology called negativity bias.
Mm-hmm.
We all look at the negative instead of looking at the positive. That's conscious leadership again. It's opportunity to look for the positive instead of being fixated on the negative, shift our attention to the positive. That's one part of it. The other part of it, if you write something and people don't like it, don't let that define you. Your worth is not really hinging upon what other people think of you. Your worth hinges upon how you think about yourself. If you're living in alignment with your values and trying to be your best self and trying to be essentially a person who's conscious, trying to do good and be the presence of good in the world, whether people resonate with that or not, it's their problem. And so it's not about I don't care, but in a way, yes, it is I don't care, because I care more about living my truth than trying to fit in and conform. Now, if people are trying to write a book to make money off of it, yeah, they may be disappointed that they didn't get the feedback that they wanted, because that's going to affect the sales of the book. But when you live also in a state of detachment where you're like doing what you love and being, just speaking your truth and being authentic and not expecting anything in return, just like not having any expectations, it's freeing.
Yeah.
But if you're like working with just this idea, oh, I want people to like it, and if they don't like it, my whole world will come crashing down, of course you're gonna be depressed.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very well said. So, in terms of the authors or the thinkers that influenced you, I noticed there's a lot of references to Rumi, to Gibran Khalil Gibran, to some of the Greek Stoicism like Marcelius. So I'm just
it's
curious to hear about who are the thinkers that and
it's
authors that influenced you.
It's a blend, basically, of spirituality, of psychology, of metaphysics, of self empowerment. I mean, Wayne Dyer, I love Wayne Dyer. Viktor Frankl, I mean, you mentioned him, but I have to say this quote is my favorite. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That is like a prayer to me. I love
Yeah.
that quote. And also the quote by Carl Jung. I mean, Carl Jung, I've read some of his work. It's kind of dense, but I love Carl Jung because he was one of the pioneers in terms of talking about the unconscious and the conscious. Unless you make the unconscious conscious, it's going to rule your life and you will call it fate.
Yeah.
A lot of us live like that, thinking, oh, this is my destiny, like life is happening to me. But then we forget that we're operating with, up to 98% of where we're operating from is from the unconscious mind. So yeah, I did like with psychology, spirituality, metaphysics, self-development. And anytime I would run or come across anything that I felt would tie into the concepts that I wanted to share in the book, I would write it down. I would take a picture of it and save it with my photos, so that I went back. And that was part again of gathering all this information. And I felt that quotes are very inspiring, because you can communicate in a couple sentences or one sentence a very powerful idea.
Yeah, I did the same with your book. I took pictures and I saved them in my Evernote capture system. So thank you. You mentioned something about fate, and coming from society like the Middle East, fate is a huge concept, and many people believe in the concept of qadar in Arabic, which is fate. And there's even a saying, uh, المكتوب على الجبين بتشوف العين, which means whatever written on your forehead is seen by your eyes. So the concept of fate is very strong, and there's like huge believers of fate. And so you can come and you tell them that you are in charge of your own fate. That's like a very negative state to some of those believers, and how would you answer those people who really believe in fate?
It disrupts their paradigm. That's why it's uncomfortable. Because if you're introducing a new concept to anybody, if they're not ready for it, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's totally understandable. At the same time, I think people they draw their sense of comfort from knowing that they're not always creating their reality. I believe we're co-creating it. We're co-creating it with God, the universe, whatever way you look at it. I mean, for most of us in the Middle East, we believe in God.
Yeah.
So for us, we're co-creating it with God. We have a free will. That's what free will comes from. This idea that we can choose our destiny. We can choose our path. And maybe there are things that are already written, they're part of our fate, but I don't think they're not for the highest good. They're always for our highest good and the highest good of everybody around us. So this idea of release that I talk about in the book, the stage of release, it's this idea of surrendering to the flow of the universe. But it doesn't mean that we don't do our part. We do our part when we choose to live from higher levels of consciousness, from that place of love and peace and acceptance. So then whatever comes our way, we accept. And instead of struggling against it, trying to make things work in the way we think they should work, we allow them. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think it takes me to probably one of my last questions before we end is I noticed that you never mentioned, or maybe I missed it, the word manifest or the law of attraction, or manifestation. And it's been big lately, manifestation. I've been reading a lot about it, the law of attraction. I guess it started with The Alchemist and so on and so forth, and the book The Secret and others. Where do you stand when it comes to manifestation?
I didn't say the word manifest, but I did say the word create.
Correct.
Because I wanted to speak to all audiences, and I didn't want to only connect with one segment of society that believes in manifestation. I believe manifestation is just the same again as creating our own reality, but it exists, and we're just and that's what brings me back to the quotes. If you read my quotes, you see that all this wisdom about how we create our own reality has been around for ages, for eons, for thousands of years. But we have a tendency as human beings to live in a place of feeling like we are at the effect of life, that we have no power over our destiny. But then again, we have free will, like I was just sharing. We have free will to co-create with God whatever reality we want to live in. And that in itself is manifesting. When Jesus in the Bible says that, I'm not good at quoting things verbatim, but the idea, and if you have the faith, enough faith, you can move mountains. Isn't that manifestation? Basically, miracles.
That
Aren't
was
they?
in the Bible. Interesting. I should go check that out. I love the story of Martha and Mary, by the
Yeah,
way, in your
yeah.
book. So yeah, it is manifestation, but it's interesting that you didn't call it manifestation or like law of attraction, which is I guess now very trendy these days.
Because it's trendy. I don't like, for people who are very much in the head, they tend to
Okay,
be more skeptical about these
correct,
things.
correct.
And I wanted to use science to show them that this stuff is not woo-woo. This stuff
Yeah,
is real. And we just have to look at it differently, and you'll see the evidence.
yeah, and I guess I'm hoping this is my last question because we're kind of been chatting for an hour. It felt like 2 minutes for me because it's
That's awesome. That means
yeah.
it's quite fun.
And for me, the idea, which is especially for moms or for women in general, doesn't that, like the skeptics, doesn't that make you selfish? If you only focus on yourself, like the story that you mentioned between, is it Martha and Mary? One of them was serving the guest, and the other one wanted to go have fun. And in the story, like Jesus sort of excused what, not sure which one, Martha or Mary, that wanted to go have fun. And the skeptic, especially when if you're a mom and you have kids and like and I heard many people criticize other moms. She's selfish, she like does not pay attention to her kids. And how would you like combat this kind of negative perception of those who pursue happiness?
It's not, it's something that comes up all the time with a lot of working moms I coach. And I coach a lot of working moms. It's actually a big part of my coaching practice. It's not about being selfish. Again, it's about being able to fill up your own cup so that you can fill up the cup of others. Like, they say, put on your mask first
Yeah.
before you help the person sitting next to you. You have to put on your mask, because if you don't have the oxygen to breathe, you cannot live in order to help others. You cannot give away what you don't have. Otherwise, you'll be running on empty. And I mean, we've seen a lot of our Middle Eastern moms running on empty, and you see what happens to them. They're disgruntled, sitting in the kitchen, cooking and complaining, right? And then it takes a toll on their bodies and they're worn out. I mean, of course, not a lot of them are housewives, but there are working moms that are just burnt out, just like moms in the West. If you cannot take care of yourself, you cannot take care of others. And that is not selfish. And it's also honoring yourself, honoring the gift that you've been given, this gift of life that you have. Your body is your vessel. You have to take care of it in order to be able to serve and to love and to take care. And plus, you would want to be a role model. What kind of role model are you for your children? Is that really the life that you want them to have? Because the clients I work with, most of the time, we're trying to unpack a lot of that programming and conditioning that we got from watching how our parents operate.
Mm.
Do we really want our children to operate like us, where we self-sacrifice and self-martyr for others, but then at the end of the day, it's not even a win-win, because we're disgruntled and everybody around us feels it.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very well said. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Joelle. And for anyone who's watching or listening, please check out Joelle's book, Unlock Your Conscious Leadership. I really enjoyed it. I learned from a lot from it, and I'm sure you will too. Any last thoughts, Joelle? Comments? Anything you'd like to say to anyone who's listening or watching?
I just want to say a big thank you to you, Natasha. I am so inspired by you that you've been able to unleash your talent. And I hope that our stories will inspire others to believe in this idea of living their values and not feel like they have to, should, and must live life in a way to conform, to fit in, to essentially what they want to be feeling is feeling accepted and not rejected. But to have the courage to just step out of their comfort zone, because success and happiness and health and fulfillment is always outside of our comfort zone. We just have to believe in ourselves that we can do it, and switch the question from can I do it to put the I before the can and say I can do it. So that would be my message to everyone. And I hope that my book inspires them to step into their highest potential and begin to lead life and live it consciously.
Thank you very much, Joelle. And thank you everyone for watching or listening to Read and Write with Natasha. And until next time.